This is the Games Podcast News Report, the only podcast that covers games podcast news. I'm Amanda Ralts Silberling, professional journalist, and this is the credit that I list first in my Twitter bio. Later on in the show, which board games are making you less attractive? The answer might surprise you. But first, our top story. Games and Feelings has just passed 1 year of podcast existence. That's 7 in dog years, 5 in cat years, and 5 million rounds of combat in D&D. I sat down with creator, question master, and best DM in podcasting Eric Silver to celebrate the anniversary of the only games advice podcast on the market. Hey, welcome to the studio.
My God, this is so nice. I mean,
Yeah,
these are some nice chairs since the last time I was here.
You wouldn't know this, but the chairs are actually made out of the fabric from the $400 Spheal plushie from the Pokemon Center.
Oh, wow. Oh, this is Pokemon Center plush? Well, I can feel it.
Yeah, It's subtle, but it's there. But, the budget for this podcast is just through the roof. We have to figure out how to spend the money somehow since, there's just, in games media, we're just all rolling in it right now.
Well, yeah, where are you going to, if you don't use it, you lose it. That's what everyone's saying. I didn't recognize you without the hat. That's the thing. It's who is that? Oh, they're not wearing a Bidoof hat. I can't figure out. Is that Amanda? Is that someone else? Oh, you have the Bidoof hat. Now there it is. That's Amanda Ralts Silberling. That's the girdleist I know.
Oh, yes. It's just sometimes I do this so that when I'm in public, people don't recognize me because, I like to keep a low profile. It's just... Sure. Everyone recognizes me from Games Podcast News Report, a podcast that exists and is very popular.
And everyone's always like, oh my God, Ralts, take a photo with me. Tell me about the newest worker relations over at Activision Blizzard. And you're like, sorry, I'm at dinner. This is my safe space. Please step back. And I think
it's like my fans need to know that workers' rights extend to very powerful Games Podcast News reporters like me who just want some privacy when they're eating their caviar out on the town.
When I'm at Carbone, the #1 Italian restaurant in New York City and on New York City TikTok, my workers' rights are my table and my right is leave me alone, please. I get that. I understand that.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you understand, but... Well, it's so great for you to be here with us today, Eric. So, to start, what inspired Games and Feelings?
Hard-hitting question from the beginning. That's what I like to know. First of all, it's a wonderful occasion to be here at the, let me read the name of this podcast that definitely exists, Games Podcast News Report. I've been listening to the show first on radio, then on network TV, and then when you moved over briefly to HBO, and then back to network, it's really nice. I followed the journey for a long time.
Oh yeah, the HBO GPNR era is, we don't talk about it, but we learned a lot,
Yeah, I mean, listen, the spin-offs, the crossover with the Sesame Street, it could have been huge.
Yeah, I mean, we even had that feature in Succession where on the podcast, in the show, we interviewed Shiv Roy.
Yeah.
She's a gamer. People don't know this about her, but
they never show it. Jesse Armstrong, it's more about on Succession what they don't show you than what they do show you. Like, that's why they're only doing a few seasons.
Brilliant television show.
I loved it when you got fired by... I love when Kendall just fired you. That was like, oh my God, that's Amanda Ralts Silberling. I didn't recognize her without the Bidoof hat, but that's her for sure.
Yeah, it's like, how like Tavi Gevinson can be Gossip Girl and I can be in Succession. But anyway, so
you mean Tavi Gevinson from Bubble, the narrator of Bubble? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, she's great.
So anyway, I'm sorry, but you're ducking the question. Where did the idea of Games and Feelings come from?
Yeah, this is actually really funny. I remember coming home from a party or something, and I was with Amanda McLaughlin, my wife, and she's a huge fan of advice columns. She's a huge fan of advice columns. She's been reading Ask a Manager, which is one of our favorites, for a very long time. And also, she's been on Dear Prudence a few times, and we've been to live shows for Dear Prudence on the various iterations of it, dating all the way back to, I don't acknowledge anyone from before Daniel Lavery. So yeah, Daniel Lavery, so great. And we were talking about trying to do another games podcast because Join the Party, I've been doing for a long time, but it's very fictional it being a fiction podcast requires a lot of legwork and me working with a lot of our collaborators, which I love, and I love doing it. But, there's space in Multitude for doing more than that. We've been kicking around ideas for a long time. And this is also, Amanda has been learning more about games, and I've slowly been chipping away from her of being like, games are bad, and now I'm just like poking her, be like, nope, you got to keep playing games with me, you just got to do it, you got to keep doing it. So eventually Amanda is coming around to like games. So I think we were definitely in an Uber coming back from a party, and she's like, what if there was a games advice podcast? I'm like, that's an incredible idea, and I'm going to make it. And that happened only a year ago. I think it was also monumental, and the reason why I remembered it, because I was in an Uber, which I hadn't been in for 2 years, coming back from a social engagement, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy, look at me. So I remember it was on one of the streets coming up to our apartment, and she said it, and I'm like, this is a really good idea.
So does Multitude, as a company, patronize Uber? I think there might be. How much do you tip your Uber drivers?
Enough and a lot all the time. Man, hard-hitting tech journalism. I love it. Listen, for somehow Amanda constantly has a discount on Lyft at all times. And I'm just like, wow. That's what you get for having a credit card. Absolutely incredible. Amanda found me. We first started dating. She found me just in the woods. She thought I was a chupacabra, but it turns out it was me. I was just hanging out, attacking goats just to get my arm strength up a little bit. And, we've been together ever since. So it's been a really emotional half decade dating her, and she's just constantly coming up with more ideas. But no, she just always has discounts. I want to shout out OBI, which you can put all of your ride shares in there and you'll figure out the cheapest one. And I think it's just it also has Curb on it, and it's a worker collective and stuff. So it's just one of those cool apps.
I did not know this app existed, which I will not admit because I'm a very serious tech journalist, and I know all technology.
But yeah, it was wild. Podcast ideas come out of anywhere. Sometimes you do it just to fill a hole that doesn't exist. I know that maybe you were joking by saying Games and Feelings is the only games advice podcast out there, and I'm not going to say that it is or is not, but it certainly is. The comedy advice podcast category is rife with ostensibly brothers of some sort talking to each other and making jokes about things, and however much they do or do not answer the question is kind of up for it. But I like doing something a little bit more specific. There are the really emotional ones like Dear Prudence, and some other relationship ones like Just Break Up. I remember, fun fact about that, Sierra de Mulder, I know her from slam poetry, so I've been knowing she's been making people cry for 15 years on the internet in various genres. So it's just it's always been either something that's incredibly emotional, or something that's purely for jokes, and it's always general, which then kind of opens up a lot of the worst trauma you've ever heard in your life, with no space to kind of talk about anything else. So doing this specifically about games and then being able to give good advice about that, I think is really necessary when you kind of drill down to what the show was supposed to be.
That is true, and what a beautiful love story of you lost in the woods, and Amanda comes riding through in a discount Lyft to save you from yourself. But you are the question keeper and the best DM in podcasting, but you don't make this show alone. Would you say everyone fits together like a heist crew or an adventuring crew?
Honestly, I would 100% say this. The thing that you learn the most about making podcasts is that everything is a group effort, even something like this, which feels super lightweight and we're just going to talk about some games and read some questions, blah, 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 and maybe do an extended bit that this is a tech podcast at the same time. But I like being able to do a joke like this or have an idea, and I need other people to help me out along the way. I mean, obviously, Amanda spends a lot of time being our CEO and doing business stuff, which, that's the only way that all this can exist. And then having someone so dependable like Mischa to edit the shows and put in funny sound effects to make things sound better. Which is something that I can't think of on my own. Like, I want that to happen. I think the best podcasts out there are when the sound design, with shows that should not have sound design in it. Hey Riddle Riddle is an incredible example of this, where like you put in a joke of sound design where you don't expect it, and then that enhances the joke that's already happening there. And I think that it's something that people don't expect at all from a conversational podcast. There's a lot of room to be funny. So Casey Tony does an incredible job of that, and Mischa has been doing that on the various shows that we do here at Multitude, and I just love that they do it, especially because they're going to make me sound like a duck here from a bunch of quacking.
Yeah, and I am also still wearing the Bidoof hat, so if we could get some beaver noises.
Do some beaver noises, yeah.
I'm just going to wear the Bidoof hat the entire time.
You should. It makes you look even more professional. And then, of course, like, you know, being the idea to push this weekly, being able to mix up different show ideas. I couldn't have done that without Jasper, which is wonderful. I mean, Jasper is someone who I've like admired for a very long time because we've been talking ever since Three Black Halflings got going. And he's just like a good bruv that I want to hang out with. And here's the thing about being in your 30s. You got to invent a podcast to hang out with other people. So just being able to do that and throw them in, I want to say congratulations to myself for getting WhatsApp so I could text Jasper whenever I want. But yeah, if it was a heist crew, I mean, I feel like Amanda's the explosives expert, much like, business is the same as explosives. You're blowing up a bank vault usually.
I have heard that from the CEO at the Games Podcast News Report.
Who's always threatening you with a bomb to stop asking for more money.
Yeah, owned by Hasbro.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I think Mischa has other tech skills, so we have an explosive expert, but we have like a hacker. I think Mischa's the hacker. And Jasper's, of course, the face, you know? Jasper's going to charm him way into any single situation. Man, I think I'm the wheels. I think I drive the car. You got to get there and you got to get out. And I really think that's my job.
Well, at the Games Podcast News Report, it's not all serious. We do have some fun and games, and in the Games Podcast News Report D&D campaign last night, we did have a skeleton wearing a hat who was steering a ship. So that's how I like to imagine you, Eric, as the skeleton steering the ship of Games and Feelings.
Is this just like Goofy, like the skeleton in Halloween Town who drives the taxi? Or is this like Sharon, the boat driver of the dead?
This is a bit more like Goofy. Yeah, I think this was just our DM wanted to make this person non-threatening and made it kind of like an Undertale Papyrus type character.
Oh, that's fair. Sure. I mean, if you just want to call me Sans Undertale, that's me. Everyone on Tumblr loves me. I have one eye. I go ooh whenever I speak. I'm exactly the same as Sans.
How did it feel to win the Tumblr Sexy Man contest?
It felt great. I'm glad I was finally recognized as a sexy man because, just because I'm not 6 feet tall and incredibly skinny, I feel like I deserve some recognition. And Sans is representing, just like me, for all the short and medium princes out there.
We stand a short and medium prince.
Short kings, medium prince. That's me.
So, back to the tech news. So, there have been some really serious gaming acquisitions in the last year. We're still waiting to see if Microsoft will be able to close the deal to buy Activision Blizzard for nearly $69 billion. But another really pivotal acquisition in games news this year was your acquisition of a white sequined glove. So since getting a white sequined glove, how has this impacted your role as the Dungeon Master on Join the Party?
That's a very good point, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about how I begged the FTC to allow my acquisition of a white sequin glove. Honestly, that's also not where I thought this question was going to go. Thank you. Good question.
I'm just improvising. I'm listened to like 3 episodes of Tell Me About It, and I can do improv now.
Oh, there you go. So you're gonna trip me up in the middle and say that I'm doing a bad job for sure. Yeah, I mean, the white chicken glove is funny. I'm still kind of trying to like formulate a thesis on this, but as someone who's been like involved in loving the actual play genre for such a long time, both in podcasting and in video, especially once Dimension 20 burst on the scene, there's been a real like LAification of actual play. And it's not to say that it's not great, because it is, because they have wonderful budgets and incredibly talented actors, and they all live in the same place, so they can all go to the sets in Los Angeles that are rented, and all of them can do it together. Like, it's very important for that, and really make stuff stand out, especially in a post-COVID world where we're still getting used to, like, actors being in the same place at the same time. But it's like, even the genre itself, like, this is becoming the modus operandi of art. Like, this is the most popular version of this version of art, which is like, you need to be a voice actor and live in LA. You got to be a professional actor or an impressionable improver / TV writer. And they have large budgets to do this stuff. And there's a very specific type of gameplay, which is, it's always Dungeons and Dragons. It's always incredibly rules light. Actually, it's closer to like long form improv than like anything that's a little bit more crunchy, which I think that like D&D is the only game that gives you permission. Not even gives you permission, but like no one gives a shit. So they're just like, I'm going to throw out this rule. It doesn't really make sense. I'm not going to follow it. So it's more akin to long form improv. And then like the peaks and valleys of emotion are so high. Like, you're going to talk about dicks for 30 minutes. And then like 20 minutes later, someone's going to talk about like how their parents left them, and they're literally going to cry on set and make the listeners cry as well. So I just think that that's the mode of art that we're dealing with right now. And it's not something that like I don't necessarily gravitate towards that type of art in general when I'm talking about my movies or TV or actual play stuff. Again, this stuff is super popular and I respect everyone. I mean, so many people love it because it's very talented, very well made. But we're trying to do something different, especially with Join the Party, which is something I'm like, I want this to feel like a game. Like, there should be game elements to it. And that means there's fun, and there's competition, and there's like a challenge. So leaning into that and making sure that's part of this art is making sure the game can stand up on its own, which then means we're not always playing D&D. We're playing Powered by the Apocalypse games where form and function really follow each other. Or maybe I'm hacking some other stuff together, like making my own game that we're going to play out. It's fun. I really enjoy it, and I love melding games into fiction. And I just worry that kind of stuff falls away because, especially with the LAification of it, it becomes more of like the entertainment business. So it's like, well, money and famous people are behind it, so it must be the only thing that exists. And then what people pursuing this art form only kind of do this thing. So I've been thinking about it a lot and kind of buying the glove and having my heel turn and saying I'm the best DM in podcasting. I think it's just been giving myself permission to like say that I'm doing something different and I think I'm really good at it. And hopefully everyone listening will also feel, permission to say it out loud. In the great Stan wars of the internet, like, it's you can still talk about like smaller stuff, and it's just, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about it, so that's the best I can kind of say at the moment.
Damn, Eric Silverhive, rise up.
Yeah, all my silver streakers out there. My silver server. My silver server is
snakes.
Silver snakes. Yeah, no.
Legends of the Hidden Temple. Which one is that? I feel like it's like silver cheetahs or something.
No, it was silver snakes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I was a red jaguar myself because the silver snakes were always absolute nerds. So silver snakes, rise up. Go on Tumblr, go on Twitter, tell your friends that I'm the best DM in podcasting.
Damn. I did have a really, not to, as a very serious journalist, I rarely talk about myself, but I did have an experience the other night where I was watching the mediocre Netflix show, Jewish Matchmaking.
Oh, how's that going, by the way?
It was fine. I mean, I do think it's funny that I do know someone who knows someone who was on the show, which is proof that Jewish geography is a real thing that somehow works. But as I was making my own D&D spell cards, because I'm very committed to not using D&D Beyond, because in my job as the host of Games Podcast News Report, I'm looking at screens all the time. And I prefer to not look at screens when I'm hanging out with my friends.
That's a good idea, though, on its own, because you can also cut down the text, and it can be bigger on the spell cards that you print out.
Yeah. So I was just like watching Jewish Matchmaking, writing some spell cards, and then this guy is like, "Oh, so here's my Game of Thrones tattoo, and then this is my tattoo written in Elvish." And I was like, "Haha, nerd!" And then meanwhile, I'm writing down like, "Here are the rules for like taumaturgy," or like however you say that cantrip. I also am trying really hard to get the line, they're called cantrips, not can't trips into something, but it hasn't really come up yet. But it's,
I think you can do that for sure. That opportunity is absolutely going to arise, Ralts.
Yeah, it's like when you run out of all your spell slots and then you use kind of like not the greatest thing at your disposal, but you have to use a cantrip because you don't have any slots left, and then you're like, well, they don't call it a cantrip for nothing.
Oh, wow. Oh, what? Your little Eldritch Blast is going to defeat me, Diedrich the Dark Knight. And then Wolf Kaminsky says they're called cantrips, not cantrips, and then Diedrich dies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, also, now I'm playing a cleric as well as everyone knows from Interplanetary 20, my hit actual play podcast, Wolf Kaminsky, my warlock, who is well known by the masses.
Named after your dentist, of course.
Oh, yes. This episode is sponsored by Kaminsky Wolf Dental.
I'm so glad you could get that ad sales. It's been a tough market. That's good.
Oh, yeah. I collaborated with Amanda McLaughlin before this podcast to see if I could help with some ad sales, because as a very professional games journalist, news report, podcaster, that's something that I think about, the business behind the games.
Yeah, and luckily you have ads that reflect your values, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and my values are that everyone deserves a dentist who writes in your file, tearful. It does say that in my file at Kaminsky Wolf Dental.
That's incredibly funny. I did not know that.
It is true. Like, I'm afraid of the dentist.
Sure.
I get nervous, it's... Speaking of getting nervous.
Wait, was it tearful appreciative? Like, does Wolf Kaminsky know? Wolf Kaminsky, the dentist, does he know about the Tumblr adjectives to put in so that when someone's actually looking at a file, they know it's tearful understanding? Or was it just tearful derogatory?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember the exact wording, but it was like, patient was nervous and tearful or something like that.
Oh, that's fine. That's pretty descriptive. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah, which, I do get nervous and tearful. And so I'm wondering, did you feel nervous and or tearful when you pushed Games and Feeling to a weekly podcast with, content like the advice episodes, bringing in Jasper as a permanent guest, the replay, and of course, everyone's favorite podcast with an acronym that everybody knows and uses all the time, with a Pitasine.
Yes. It's funny. I mean, I feel like so many shows need to be weekly right now, unless you have a really good reason.
A really good reason, like you're making a podcast that is barely breaking even, and one of you is a very serious games journalist, and one of you is a corporate lawyer.
Yeah, that's a really good reason. If you're doing it for fun, I mean, I'm saying like business professionally. I think that's always the thing I need to say, that like when I give this advice, this is like for my full-time job currently right now. Business. Is like this needs to come out, and Games and Feelings, I wanted to do more of it. Also, it was like too guest dependent, which is something I always tell other people not to do. But I kept needing to have 2 guests on. And also I wanted to shout out the other people, like all the people at Multitude and the various guests that we've had on over this last year. Like, they're all incredible. And it was so nice, like having Jenna Stieber on and having Jeremy Cobb on, also from 3 Black Halflings, and also like Julia and Brandon coming on as well. But I just wanted to have someone else who it was fun to be around. And Jasper's always super fun to be around. And again, I want to spend more time with him. So I locked him into a podcast. And it's been incredible. I've been just hanging out with Jasper over the last, we only started going weekly like a few months ago. So it's just been got really nice flow. Also, just being able to intersperse other types of shows in. Amanda and I have been doing the replay on the Patreon for a while, and everyone should join the Patreon at patreon.com/gamesandfeelings so you can hear all the episodes. Various times I say the replay is a better show than Games and Feelings. I don't know why we're not just doing this, because it's just like a critique of advice columns and trying to understand why advice columns exist and who uses them. Also, it's kind of nice, exposing my advice to advice columns. It's just very much not for me and not in the vein of people who need to use advice columns or might respond to them. It's very, I think that the people who use them are trying to validate bad feelings that they have, whether they are not allowed to share them in their own community and they're scared, or they did something bad but they don't want to admit it, and then they write into advice column. Like, so many questions in advice columns are really just, am I good? Was this fine that I did this? Please validate me. More than asking questions. And like, that's not the kind of person I am. I'll run forward and then just see what happens later, because I'd rather, defend myself or my family or my friends or my relationship or whatever. But at the same time, is like, I think I come down a little harder than some of these advice people. Like, even Ask a Manager, who's great. I think she also, which is a wonderful advice column about work, I think that she still believes in like the corporate structure, because she worked in HR for a long time, and like, man, I got drummed out of corporate life so quickly because I had feelings and they didn't like that. And it's just like, especially in 2023, examining like the capitalist structure, which I think is games and feelings at large, but also a lot of these advice columns about like, so many are about manners and who's supposed to pay for stuff or blah, blah, blah. It's like, it means so much different, I think, to me in 2023. Also, I'm so happy I got to bring back Whiff-a-Patasane.
I know. I love Whiff-a-Patasane. I listened to it in the pandemic before I knew you, because I was just like, this is nice to just hear people talk about Pokemon.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I was also trying to use it as like a way to make more friends. Like, invite people.
That's the secret. You have to podcast to make friends.
Yeah, and also just like, hey, I don't have a real good space to say nice things about you because it's May 2020 and everyone's being really fucking weird. So it's just been really nice to bring that back, and just kind of expanding the space a little bit. I mean, the birthday episode that came out was really sweet, and it kind of made the whole thing worth it. And I was just super happy about that. And, you also get to reveal that people like Pokemon. Unless they're saying it like explicitly, you wouldn't know that someone loves Pokemon.
I feel like I say it explicitly pretty often, but I get what you mean.
But I guess, like, unless
that aren't wearing a Bidoof hat right now.
True. Unless you are outwardly talking about Pokemon. Like, I know plenty of people who play it and just never talk about it. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, do you want to play this Pokemon ROM hack? And they're like, what the fuck does that mean? I'm like, never mind.
Speaking of which, have you started playing Pokemon Emerald Rogue?
I want to. Here's the problem. So you told me about it. It seemed really great. I've watched a bunch of actual plays of it. Or, sorry, I watched a bunch of YouTube...
Actual plays.
Not actual plays. I've watched a bunch of YouTubers play through it, and now I kind of understand it a little bit more of, like, the flow of the game. I used to play it on Macs, which is where I would just put it on, like, OpenEMU or one of the stuff, and I know it's easier. Yeah. But, like, my most powerful computer, the king of games, is Windows, and I'm definitely a little bit more, like, antsy about trying to get that going over on Windows. So it's just, like, trying to just push through. Like, I ended up rebuying Skyrim just so I would have something to play while I'm, like, when this comes out, Tears of the Kingdom will already be out. But, like, I've been kind of, like, really twiddling my thumbs for the last few weeks, just kind of waiting for the new Zelda. So I should have been playing it.
Well, as the Kara Swisher of games journalism, I do have a confession, which is that I still haven't finished playing Breath of the Wild because I found it really hard at first.
Sure.
And I had to, like, FaceTime Isabel, the co-host of the Games Podcast News Report. It was the only podcast I host. Mm-hmm. And I had to FaceTime her and be like, how do I get the paraglider? You need to help me.
No, I think it's fair. I mean, it was also my first Zelda game. I was not a Zelda person. I'm definitely, and I love Nintendo. It's just those puzzles just never appealed to me. I would rather platform or play like Pokemon instead. Definitely the Mario and Pokemon arm of Nintendo. So you don't realize it's very much like Zelda thinking, and you don't know, which is funny to think that like Breath of the Wild also many consider to be the best game of all time, but it still does have video game logic that other people don't know. So I totally understand. I didn't understand how to do like any of the divine beasts because doing the dungeons is very much like Zelda puzzle thinking that I've never been exposed to. So I had to look up walkthroughs for every single one. Every single one. Even on both playthroughs that I've done. First when it came out and when I got a Switch, and then recently I replayed it on like when I got a new TV. And I'm like, I still don't know how to do this. This is so stupid.
Yeah, I was like in like the first 5 minutes of the game being like, so if I cut down this tree and I get it to land in the right place, and then I can walk across this on a bridge I created, and I was like, wait, I'm making it too hard. I don't even have the paraglider yet. But I need to get back to that. Anyway, before we continue, we're going to throw to a commercial break. This podcast is sponsored by cheating at TTRPGs. Cheating. When you want your friends to think you're so cool that nothing bad ever happens to your imaginary character. Now, even though I'm the Kara Swisher of journalism, let me tell you a story that happened to me yesterday. I was rolling an attack roll to hit. I rolled an @1. No one knew I rolled, and I thought, should I just re-roll it? And then I did. And then I thought, I feel so guilty. And then I thought, at my table, we have a rule that if you're the person that orders the pizza, you get free inspiration. So I just used my inspiration, and then I didn't cheat. Sometimes cheating at TTRPGs could be the right move for you if you do not have pizza inspiration. Cheating at TTRPGs comes in a few flavors: adding modifiers where there aren't any, disguising your dice roll and saying it's good, or being so annoying about small stuff that the GM says, fine. Cheating at TTRPGs. Get them wherever games are played. And we'll be right back.
I like your personal experience you put in that ad read. Good job. Hey, it's Eric. And usually I have a snack here, but I would love to share part of a message from Polly Burridge, our first producer level patron. Hey Eric, happy nearly 1 year. Just wanted to drop a little line and say how much G&F has meant to me in the past year. There is a reason I was the first producer level patron. I knew it was going to be amazing. Everything you touch turns to gold. I love games, and I love that there's no discrepancy on the types of games you're willing to talk about. I feel like traditionally, something like this may not include sport, but you do, and that makes it even more special to me. Surely no shocks there. Context, Polly is very into sports, especially Australian rules football, and it's wonderful watching her on Twitter. Okay, back to the note. The way you discuss feelings always hits close to home for me because I think we have a very similar nature, but you're so mature in your responses. I seriously look forward to it every week, the replay included, and I hope it continues for many more years. P.S. I honestly think about the "What shall it be?" from the Buddha games once a week. I don't think I've ever laughed harder at a podcast. Oh my God, that was one of our first episodes. That was with Mischa and Marquez. Ugh, I love that episode. Thank you, Polly. I appreciate it so much. And honestly, that's why I like making the show. Being able to talk about games and doing like advice, being funny and giving actual advice is nice. Being able to give feelings and also laughter. I mean, that's how we do it. That's how we do it here on the pod. If you want to give us an anniversary present and support this wonderful independent content, come on over and join the Patreon. You're not just doing it for fun. You get the replay, which you're already getting on the main feed, but you get Patreon versions of it. I think you're really going to like it. We're also going to do ad-free episodes very soon. So if you can get that RSS feed that you get from Patreon, then you're already in there. You're already in the mainframe. That's going to be easy for you. Patreon.com/gamesandfeelings. And as always, shout out to producer level patrons, Polly Burridge, Kelsey Duffy, and Peyton, who are just ride and die homies. I love that. Thank you. Patreon.com/gamesandfeelings. No ads today. Just get back to the episode.
Speaking of the replay, so I mean, it's really brave of you to pioneer a new genre of advice podcast, which is a husband and wife telling people advice. Like, no one has ever done that before, especially not anyone who also has a brother. So how has that felt for you to be pioneering a new genre of media?
You know, Amanda Ralts Silberling, I don't like talking about ifs or whatevers. I gotta live in the now. So I think this is a really unfair question to ask. It's really a gotcha question, setting me up for one of those, like, you're just gonna clip this out and put it on TikTok. So I'm going, next question, please. My PR person is saying next question. I really don't appreciate it. I thought that you had better journalistic standards than this.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that Mischa also was your PR person now. I feel like that's a conflict of interest for them to be both your editor and doing your PR. That makes me wonder about Multitude's standards as a podcast studio.
Mischa, can you just put some duck sounds over whatever Amanda just said? Thank you. Appreciate it.
And, you know, speaking of some scandal, there's been some real scandal this year, and I wouldn't be doing my job as a journalist if I didn't ask about the incident with Nintendo, where, you know, Games and Feelings just had Nintendo send FBI agents to the studio to retrieve some unreleased amiibo from Generation 10 of Pokemon. So what was that experience like? And how did they get into the studio? It's on like the second floor.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I think that you have the story incorrect. I sent the Pinkertons to Nintendo to go get amiibos. It's different because, we're a small business here at Games and Feelings, and we really, we got to punch above our weight. So we actually can afford the Pinkertons as well. We're doing so well financially. That's why we sent them all the way to Japan to Nintendo to get the amiibos. I just thought it was a really good marketing play for Games and Feelings.
I do think this is good information for the patrons of Games and Feelings to know that their Patreon dollars are going towards hiring the Pinkertons.
Can you fucking believe that actually happened? What a
No, I still just think about how did that happen?
Nothing is funnier than knowing that a toy company hired the most notorious goon squad in American history to go harass a guy who accidentally got magic cards early. It's so funny.
There was a question about the Pinkertons on Jeopardy last night, and I was like, oh, I know this. I just read the entire Wikipedia page of the Pinkertons 2 weeks ago.
Here, let's answer this question in a different way. I just think it's wild. I wasn't prepared. Obviously the world's pretty dystopic in the way that companies are running their shit right now, but I didn't know it would affect games so much. Obviously when we started kicking around Games and Feelings, all the Activision stuff has been going on, and of course the Me Too movement and their intersection in games and games media and games creation, and we're all living in a post Gamergate world that people can just knowing that the right wing can mobilize like that and ruin people's lives, that's just out there, and that's the thing there. But at the same time it was gamers are just gross guys, capital G gamers, and we're trying to create a new space for people who think about this a little bit more complex. But I didn't know this was going to directly intersect in the thing I like, which is how many unforced errors there's been on behalf of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast and tabletop RPG Twitter. I just wasn't anticipating that. And it's been great to be able to talk about that freely and talking about labor rights and workers' rights on the show. I just didn't think it was going to be so much of a focus, that it was going to be that easy for laymen to talk about so many hilarious scandals, as opposed to digging into video game companies investor talks and trying to glean this from secrets. It's just out there.
No, it's so funny how I went to a party a couple weeks ago because I go to parties, even though I'm the Kara Swisher of games journalism. But
how are people supposed to know you're Kara Swisher if you don't go out there and go to parties? For sure.
Yeah, I did meet real Kara Swisher in real life a couple weeks ago. She was just a person. I don't know.
That's the thing about journalists in their 40s and 50s. They have $10 million and they still dress like your mom. It's wild.
Yeah, she was just I'm texting my son about Snapchat, so I know what to ask Evan Spiegel at this thing later. Which is honestly a good, I do think that's a good idea as a journalist to talk to young people about things that young people are using.
But it's not young people, it's your son. You always know that it's just their children. This is where Kara Swisher, Bill Simmons does this all the time. It's so funny.
Yeah, but so, as the Kara Swisher of games journalism, when I was at this party, someone was talking about the D&D movie, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't really know if I want to see it. Feels just kind of like a money grab from Hasbro. And if you look in their investor reports, they've been saying that they want to make Dungeons and Dragons into a 4-quadrant gaming franchise, Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, and did you know, and then the OGL and blah, blah, blah. And then now it's just they sent the Pinkertons to a random guy's house because he made a video about magic cards.
Yeah.
Which I also do acknowledge I'm hypocritical in my not wanting to see the D&D movie because I think the Mario movie sounds fun.
The Mario movie's great. Okay, it's all complicated. I also want to say the D&D movie was fine. It was a 6. And I can see how people like it. And it's nice. I mean, Chris Pine is incredibly charismatic. Justice Smith is very funny. Hugh Grant is so good at playing a Cockney villain. Michelle Rodriguez is funny. The big cameo. It was all very fun. It just felt like they were truly mailing it in and say, like, we have IP now. And everyone now, there's the fans are so ruined by Marvel that, like, everyone thinks they're a little Kevin Feige. So it's like there are articles. I literally read an article the other day that's like, it's so unfair that the D&D movie is probably not going to get a sequel because it made over $150 million, but it's not going to make its budget back. So they're not going to give it a sequel. I'm like, either you like the free hand of the market or you don't. Like, what the fuck is your problem? So it's just the whole thing is wild. I also want to point out that I told my wife, Amanda McLaughlin, she started reading like a third of the way through the movie, and I told her to leave because we were at like a free screening that we were able to go to, and I'm like, people here are going to like this movie. You can't be on your phone during the reading the entire time.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question, which again, as a quality journalist, I have to ask the hard-hitting questions, but according to social media, your permanent guest, Jasper William Cartwright, seemed to enjoy the Dungeons & Dragons movie.
Sure.
But I did, you just said it was a 6. I also received an anonymous tip on Signal that said maybe you thought it was actually more like a 5?
No, I said it was a 6. I don't know who is spreading rumors. I don't know what whistleblowers out there saying I said it was a 5.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not to betray my sources, but it was Mischa.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's a good point.
But, how has this disagreement impacted your relationship with Jasper?
Something I love about Jasper, and this is why he's infinitely more successful than me, is that he genuinely likes a lot of things. And, like, in a way that I think that you might think that if someone else was doing it, it'd be like, oh, wow, you're really just gassing up other people just so you could seem like a yes man and they'll like you. But he genuinely loves things and he loves talking to people. And he's just like incredibly accepting. And like, listen, again, I'm also not saying that it wasn't interesting. And it wasn't like, yeah, that was a fantasy action film with some Marvel-esque writing. But Jasper just liked it better than me. And he's much better at liking things than I am. And it's one of the reasons why I like being around him.
See, this is why it's just blatantly false when people say that Jews control the media, because we would both be doing better if we didn't hate everything and complain about so much.
Absolutely true. We would both have so many more Twitter followers if the Jews ran the media. Absolutely.
I know, like, instead of being the Kara Swisher of games journalism, I would be the Anderson Cooper of games journalism.
Pretty good. Also good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just hanging out with the Andy Cohen of games journalism and getting drunk, for sure.
I would be doing the New Year's Rockin' Eve.
Just watching the big D20 drop. Yeah, for
yes,
sure.
Exactly. You also launched the game show Tell Me About It this year with Adel Rafai, and Apple Podcast reviewer Luke Astro wrote on 420, blaze it, a billionaire and his blurf derf butler quizzing semi-celebs about unctuous nonsense? Sign me up thrice. And I'm curious what you think Luke means by blurf derf.
I did not read this review before. You were just like, yeah, I guess he says blurf derf somewhere. I didn't know it was about me. I don't know what blurf derf means. I also don't know what unctuous nonsense means. Me
neither.
Unctuous is like the word you say when like something's like you go to like a tasting menu and you realize you spent like $200 on something that's like mostly fat, and you're like, it's so the mouthfeel, it's so unctuous. And so I'm like, I don't know what unctuous nonsense means here. Semi-celebrities also is such a what an absolute neg did Luke Astro did on 420. I don't know. I do also think that there's like a lot of capacity for more game shows that can be like a little more wacky instead of straightforward. I mean, listen, Wait, Don't Tell Me and Ask Me Another are backbones of radio. It's like loose, but it's also a straightforward game show. Like, people get it. it. So I was just trying to bring a Taskmaster to podcasting and being able to do it with Adel, who I've been calling a legend of improv both in Chicago and on podcasting. And I wouldn't do that to his face because he's so Midwestern. He would say, no, and then pay me $20 to stop saying it. It's been so much fun, and he's great, and the show has been really fun to make.
I also do think it's really funny that, as a member of the press, I did receive an early test run of Tell Me About It.
Yeah.
And at first you were the billionaire, but now you're the butler. So how has that impacted, your ego in the show?
I always thought it would happen. I mean, honestly, that's like all of my shows is I'm the butler, but also I created the show and I'm show running it. Like, that's all my shows. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was also a fun thing. I mean, it's something that I don't get a chance to talk about that much, but like, it was something that Mischa and I started kicking around a while ago. And Mischa is also the co-creator of that. And Mischa also edits it and does wonderful sound design for it as well. So a lot of the stuff we do here on Games and Feelings, I think, is transferred over to Tell Me About It. And like being able to do like a improv show, I think also allows for more of that fun sound design. So it's like vaguely fiction. So it's easier to like just put the sound design jokes I was talking about. It's a little bit less startling. And it just makes people enjoy it even more. Well, Amanda Ralts Silberling, I know that you spend so much time asking people questions, but what if I turned this around on you and made you talk about something instead?
Oh ho ho. In real life, this happened to me on a stage in front of like thousands of people, and it was horrifying.
Yeah, that's because VC guys love pulling one over on journalists.
It wasn't a VC guy, it was a scary lawyer lady.
That's the same. Those are the same people.
That was representation, girl bossing.
That's truly girl bossing, trying to pull one over on a journalist on a stage.
She was like, well, why does it matter what the percentage of adult creators versus non-adult creators are on OnlyFans? And I was like, because the working conditions are different and the things that they have to deal with are different with like legislation.
Because they're children, you ghoul. What the fuck do you mean? See, this is why no one gives me jobs, because I called someone a ghoul on this podcast. Yeah, but hey, I have two pieces of news I would love to talk to you about, because, you are a tech journalist alongside being the host of the Games Reviews News podcast. I can't remember the name of the show.
It's, damn, name 5 of our songs. We're the Games Podcast News Report, which, as I mentioned, is the first credit I list in my Twitter bio.
That's true. So I have 2 pieces of news here I would love to talk to you about. One is a depressing news that I would like to try to find some positive lining on it, which you'll hear in a moment. And the second one is about things you don't usually talk about on podcasts. So which would you like to talk about? We'll probably have time for both, so please, whatever you want first.
I just kind of like blanked out.
Okay, we'll do the first one then, because it's about the American military, so we'll start there.
Hell yeah.
This recently came across my transom, and it's the wildest shit I've ever seen. I saw it on Reddit, and I had to run it down to be like, this can't be real. Oh, it's real. Here is a press release from the Navy saying the Navy Sea Lions love video games.
Imagine being the person who is doing PR for the Navy and then writing about the video games that the Sea Lions are playing, apparently.
The only thing about that is, like, they're also in the Navy, so I think they're okay with it. Like, imagine you're in the Navy and you do PR. Like, that's wild.
Oh yeah.
The short answer, I'll include a link to the episode in the episode description to this thing, but it's like, because also it's PR from the Navy, so it's pretty pro Navy. But basically, they're training sea lions to use rudimentary video games, part of some program of video enrichment for sea animals. And I'm just like, why why does the Navy need to do this? Like, why is this a specific program? Apparently 300 people care for the program's more than 120 sea lions and dolphins, all of which are trained in reconnaissance and recovery tasks that marine mammals can perform better than humans. But don't worry, enrichment activities such as open ocean swims, playtime and with toys, and now video games are central to their care. So basically, the Navy has adopted some marine creatures to make them do marine stuff for the Navy, but also they're calling it like the same thing as when you throw a watermelon into a tiger's cage.
So this is like, instead of the TSA having dogs that can smell weed, this is like the Navy having dolphins that can retrieve like weapons from the sea.
I think so. I think it's also really funny that they're doing like an Ender's Game for sea lions. They're like, sea lion, you're so good at the video game. Do it in real life. I don't want to talk about this anymore because it's absolutely fucking bumming me out. So as a tech journalist and someone who also loves games, the like dystopic thing I was talking about with companies earlier, like, man, how do you feel good about some of the news that's coming out? I think the only thing is that like it's so fucking goofy from the bad guys that it actually is like easy to kind of like mobilize around it. But I just wanted you to know, because you're someone who has to deal with Elon Musk quite a lot more than I do.
I do have to deal with Elon Musk quite a lot. I feel like this kind of gets at my primary rant about being adjacent to tech, which is that by working adjacent to tech, I realize more than ever how important humanities education is, where just like knowing a little bit of history and knowing how when corporate greed goes too far, bad things happen. Like, right. I guess this kind of reminds me of one of my recent rants of late, is that everyone is like, oh my God, like, how can we use ChatGPT to like write found poetry and whatever? And it's like, people have been doing this shit for hundreds of years. Like, please take one art history class. The same thing happened with NFTs, where someone, like I wrote about this like years ago, where someone made something called a low effort NFT, where it just was a piece of paper that said low effort NFT, and they photographed it and then sold it for like thousands of dollars.
Yeah, that's the Dada movement, my guy.
And then people, like crypto people, were so mad about it and like having discussions, like they're the first people who have ever discussed the relationship between effort and value in art making. And it's like, guys, please, one single art history class, please. And that's sort of how this makes me feel. It just feels like they're not thinking about any of the implications of like training sea lions and dolphins to do your military bidding for you.
Right.
It just feels kind of weird.
It's like, yeah, they're running down something that just doesn't. It's like, yeah, oh, you know who totally remembers things and will definitely are so easily controlled? And we have tons of stories about how easily they are controlled. Animals, the natural world, for sure. Yeah, I think that's the only thing. That's what I'm saying is like how goofy and stupid everything feels. Is like the thing that's giving me hope, especially around the writer's strike, is like as terrible and ghoulish as the world is, like it can't win out because it's so stupid.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's wild about the writer's strike. And I wrote about this for my real job that, actually, no, what am I talking about? The Games Podcast News Network.
Crunch.
Which, is that even? Yeah, it's wild because from the writers I talked to, it seems like the striking writers put something like AI can't be, like, we can't be used to iterate on AI generated content, or we can't adapt an AI story. Like, that was something that they just kind of threw in there because they were like, yeah, why not cover all of our bases? And then the studios were like, no.
We're like, we are never responding to this claim ever. It's like, oh, wow. It's just, yeah, because the people at the top, they're just following the flavor of the week. And I also thought it was silly. Like, why are we addressing AI stuff? It's like, no, you have to, because they heard it from their son that AI is the future, and now it becomes a massive bargaining point in a union dispute. Yeah, for sure.
And then to bring it back to Succession, the show that I, Amanda Ralts Silberling, guested on and was fired by Kendall Roy.
Yeah, you worked at Volter. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. Someone, which, like, I replicated this also on ChatGPT, but theirs just had a funnier little line. But someone wrote a Succession script with ChatGPT, and the opening line was Kendall saying, "Who will be the successor? Me." And that's just been, like, stuck in my head for, like, the last week. Who will be the successor? Me,
Kendall, the character. Yeah. I mean, every single thing is a mechanical Turk, right? Every single
Yeah.
thing is.
And literally in 2016, I wrote a paper about how it's unethical that people were using Amazon Turk to do weird poetry projects.
Yep, because a person's in there. That's the whole thing about Mechanical Turks. There's always a person in there every single time. Oh boy.
But in the case of ChatGPT, the person is literally all of us because it's trained on just the internet.
This came out yesterday. I read it on Gizmodo, and this is coming out in a little while from when we're recording it. But like, also, there's people in the global south are tagging data so that ChatGPT can exist. So literally, there's people involved. It's not like AI doesn't exist. It's not like in the movies. There's always a person's hand on the wheel. Which, whether we're talking about self-driving cars or ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, like, Meta has contractors in Africa that get paid very little to, like, watch horrible videos and be like,
of course.
Yep, this was a video of violence. This was a video of, like, insert bad things here. We're gonna get demonetized on YouTube if I say certain words.
If someone got unalived again. But the thing is that, like, I know it's so horrible, but again, like, it's not like they're the undefeatable company from like a movie, because Meta is a great example. They just pulled out of the metaverse because it was stupid and no one fucking cared. So it's like they took such an L. They spent billions of dollars on the whole thing, and Meta is such a worse company after Zuck tried to run the shit down. So it's like, even as there are horrific things happening at the same time, the goofiness, I think, is galvanizing people instead of making, like, bury their heads in the sand that, like, there's just too much tragedy that we can't deal with. But like the goofiness and the stupid stuff, I think, is actually starting to get people like always join unions, support the writer's strike, confront their bosses. I mean, we hear about this all the time when we talk about Gen Z in the workplace, but I think that's the only silver lining, is like these people keep fucking up so hard. It's so either A, it's unless you're an absolute ghoul if you defend it, and B, it's galvanizing people to actually stand up to it.
Yeah, and I mean, to bring it back to some serious times in this Games and Feelings anniversary podcast.
Sure.
Like, a lot has happened in game studios over the last year with, like, labor drives that literally would have never been thinkable a couple years ago, but, like, multiple units within Activision Blizzard have unionized. Microsoft has this, like, union neutrality policy where they're basically like, yeah, if you guys get a supermajority on your own, we're not going to make you, like, send it to the NLRB for a vote. We'll just be like, all right, cool. And then, so because of that, then ZeniMax, which is, I think, part of Bethesda. Did I make that up? It's hard to keep track of all the moving parts when you're the Kara Swisher of journalism. Just Kara Swisher of journalism generally. You're the best DM in podcasting.
I'm Kara Swisher.
And you're listening to Pivot with Scott Galloway.
Oh my God. Yeah, I've been Scott Galloway the whole time.
God.
I understand your point. I also don't want to make light of this, but I think that this is the thing. Is like, if the story didn't come out that like bros were like messing around with people's breast milk that they were pumping, I don't think like you need the ridiculous story or the to shake you out of like the banal evil of these corporate existences. I think is like the only, like, they're not even good at being bad. They're just bad.
Yeah, I mean, also we see so much good happening, but we're not seeing all of the bad. Like, a group of like 150 people at Sega's headquarters in California want to form a union, and I wrote about them wanting to form a union a couple weeks ago, and then I looked on the NLRB page yesterday, and it says that they hired Littler Mendelsohn to be the lawyers for Sega.
Yes, Sega did, yeah.
This is the union-busting company that is, like, behind Amazon and Starbucks, which also then somebody told me that they think Sega might have hired somebody else, but that's just hearsay. I'm doing journalism in real time. I don't know what the exact truth is, but if you do go to the NLRB website where they have the Sega case open, it does say that Sega hired Littler Mendelsohn. And this is also funny because the president of Sega, his response to the initial, like, announcement that they wanted to unionize, in an email, he was like, I don't know much about unions, but it's time to learn, and then we'll like regroup. And it's like,
I learned and I hated it. Yeah, for sure.
I learned and I hired the most notorious union busting law firm. Nothing
is going to be more galvanizing for people to stand up is like all the Sanic memes that's going to pair along with union drives. Like, again, they should start making better 3D Sonic games before they start union busting. Again, Starbucks, like Howard Schultz shouldn't be so much of a goddamn clown if he wants to continue to like have economic dominance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It would be lovely if people would pay people.
Yeah, and I think it will happen because they keep getting absolutely clowned on.
All right, well, that's it for us at Games Podcast News Report. I'd like to thank my producer, Patty Wampus Jones. I didn't read this before. My editor, Maximus Alphanumerical, my co-host, Scott Calloway, and our engineer, Good Audiobot 5000. For legal reasons, meaning that she's legally threatening me with 2 broadswords, 1 in each hand, I'll thank my lawyer, Isabel. I'm Amanda Ralts Silberling, and that was all the Games Podcast news that was fit to print.
Wow, great show. Great show. I agree. That was great.
Yeah, I learned a lot about, your creative process. Yeah.
Yeah, contemporary poetry, huh? I wouldn't have thought.
Oh, yeah, it's just really, like, the teleology of it is very similar to games.
Damn.
And, the meta-narratives at play.
Games and Feelings is produced by Eric Silver and edited and mixed by Mischa Stanton. The theme music is Return to French Toast Castle by Jeff Bryce, and the art was created by Jessica Boyd. Find transcripts for this episode and all episodes at our website, gamesandfeelings.com. Until next time, press X to enjoy the podcast.